Alex.
Okay, so I'm speaking about the voluntary community and social enterprise sector in Greater Manchester. Everybody seems to be fairly agreed that our sector has absolutely risen to the challenge of the COVID emergency and mobilised at force across the whole of the city. But as well as mounting that response to the crisis and as well as providing crucial services, our local VCSE organisations are crucial to the normal life of communities. And if we were to lose them, it would not be easy to create them. So this is a sector that's grown up over many, many years into a fabric of interconnected organisations which underpin resilient and inclusive communities. At the moment, every source of income for our local charities and social enterprises has been decimated at once. Trading has ceased. Opportunities to apply for funding have been delayed. Many funders have repurposed their programmes on short-term COVID-related activity. We're also very reliant as a sector on face-to-face fundraising within communities. And reserves are very low, so a quarter have a month, half have less than 3 months, and 2/3 of BAME organisations have none at all, and organisations are already starting to close down. Now, we know that the money to help our sector doesn't exist at GM level. We know the public sector is also being decimated. And we've written as a VCSE sector to the Chancellor asking for adequate funding to enable our local organisations to continue their work just when they're needed most. So my question is, how can we work together to try to ensure that our local charities and social enterprises have the money they need to survive and to contribute to building back better? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for that. Thank you for sticking to the time limit. Our next contributor is Lee.
Hello, everybody. It's Lee Sutton here, representing Greater Manchester housing providers. I suppose this pandemic has highlighted, 1 in 5 people in Greater Manchester live in a social housing property, and our role has been critical, really, in stepping up, supporting some of the most vulnerable in society. Housing associations have been working very closely with local authority partners, supporting the response to some of those most vulnerable people in society, and ensuring that we play our part in giving them what they need. I think one of the reflections that we're starting to have is how the pandemic has impacted in an unequal way and highlighted inequalities in society. And so we're thinking about how our organisations will be able to step up as we look to come out of the pandemic, to be able to sort of give that resilience within certain communities that have been highlighted. Specifically, one of the key areas we've been working with the combined authority, local authorities, is homelessness and rough sleepers. There's been a fantastic response within England, and particularly within Greater Manchester, to ensure that everybody had a roof over their head, as has been called Everybody In. And I was going to ask Andy when he comes on later just exactly how we can play our part to make sure that the opportunity that's been presented by engaging with some of these people isn't lost as we progress through the year. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have next we have Annie and Adam from Manchester Airport Group.
Hi there. Yes, I just wanted to set a bit of a scene of the impact initially, but also, I guess, the criticality of the airport and aviation to recovery, and perhaps some of the issues faced to spark a discussion around how we can work together to unblock some of these things. To give you an idea of where things are at right now, we are currently about 99% down on demand and business. We have about 70% of our staff currently furloughed, and we'd normally be handling around 80,000 passengers a day, and just 2 days ago we handled 128, which was the same we would normally handle in 2 minutes during the peak. So we remain open, but clearly operations are significantly reduced, and as a result, revenue significantly reduced, and we remain in a position where there is uncertainty around what recovery will look like. in lots of different senses. You know, we have natural concerns around what quarantine will look like. We have natural concerns over the financial health of the sector and our partners in that sector, and natural concerns around what, you know, a safe return to international travel will look like. I think the key point to leave in the virtual room in many ways is, you know, Manchester Airport as being sort of a critical asset in terms of its sort of ongoing survival and ability to thrive in its own right. 25,000 jobs directly, 45,000 indirectly. That's significant if that falls over, and I'm not saying it will. But I think when you start to look at the recovery, you start to realise perhaps how more critical of an asset it is to the city region. There are obviously the jobs and supply chains that are directly underpinned and supported. But I think we need to be clear that this is probably one of the most important enablers for everything that the GM economy has come to be and aspires to be. If you want to look at some of the sectors that are being nurtured, they rely more than most on international access and access to key centres of excellence. You've got to think of the boost life sciences being given from access to the likes of Boston, tech, San Francisco, creative industries, LA. You've got to look at the number of businesses who we want to encourage to export and being able to provide, I think, direct links to 9 out of the 10 top export markets for the UK. Then you've got to think about how vibrant in normal circumstances your visitor economy is, with all of the fantastic natural, cultural, sporting assets that the region has to offer. And they rely on us being able to provide that direct access to 9 of the 10 top inbound tourism markets as well. I don't need to tell people, of course, how important from an inward investment point of view and showcasing the place somewhere to do business relies on international connectivity. And of course, the university sector, which I'm sure we'll hear from in a second, you know, benefits greatly from that as well. So what we're starting to push for really is to make sure that, particularly for GM, but for the whole of the North, that in the list of issues that are going to be critical to recovery, there'll be some themes there, but there are also some individual assets and sectors like aviation that are going to be absolutely critical to the kind of recovery that we want as a city region, but also the balanced recovery and the levelling up agenda that the UK wants, and an opportunity to deliver that. But I think the position we're in now is where we're not clear, we are clear that demand won't just switch back on. This is probably the combination of the impact of a previous health-related shock, the SARS situation, and the impact of a financial shock, like the global financial crisis together. And I think what we need and need the support of people in the room, which we're grateful of already, is, you know, firstly, recognition of that significance from government of how critical, you know, the sector is, but how critical individual assets like the airport are to the recovery agendas of city regions, but also the actions that match that recognition. And I think our sense would be that the recognition was lacking at first, and it was just about being switched on. But there are some things that remain extremely challenging, not least quarantine arrangements and the ongoing uncertainty around those things. Of course, you know, public health has to come first, you know, but we need to get across the line the measures that are going to give people clarity about when they can and can't travel and how. We need to get across the line these air bridges and reciprocal arrangements with other countries. And then I think we need to recognise the fixed cost nature of airports and aviation as well. We remain open, and the furlough scheme will account for about 5% of our total running costs for the year, where meanwhile things like business rates are we're seeing relief in Scotland, Northern Ireland, and not being provided in England. We need to look at those things, but also how can we preserve employment and preserve the long-term strength through the right kind of extension to the job retention scheme and a tapered exit for that, recognising the sectors that won't see that immediate demand. And I think all of us in the longer term would be eager to see as quickly as possible the return to the commitment to the infrastructure schemes and spending that are going to give us that levelling up, particularly your HS2, High Speed North schemes, and perhaps take the opportunity to reimagine those and see how we can, you know, really provide a shot on the arm to the northern economies and provide that balanced recovery, and aviation will form part of that. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of where things are at, the things that we need. And I think we're eager to have discussions either individually or as a collective, how we can maintain that pressure on government to recognise the importance of the sector and the short, medium and long-term things that we need to support us.
Thank you, Adam. There was a phone call, there was a Zoom call yesterday on the aviation sector in particular, and I know several MPs on this call today were on that call yesterday. So I know the discussions are ongoing, and it's a very serious matter. So we'll come back to that. But I think the next we have Gaynor from United Utilities.
It's not Gaynor, it's Tom, isn't it?
Right, sorry. The document is Gaynor, yeah. Tom?
Yeah, no. It's a last minute change.
No problem.
United Utilities.
So, Tom on the call? Or?
It's John.
Oh, John.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a last minute.
At Tom and I'm thinking it's John. Anyway,
Yeah, no, not a problem.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone.
Apologies.
So apologies from Gaynor who couldn't make the meeting. So it's been passed to me short notice. So just listening to the couple of calls beforehand for United Utilities, obviously I don't need to tell everyone how vital the water and wastewater infrastructure is in everyday life anyway, and especially now during this crisis. So I suppose for us, the big impact from COVID, we've been looking at it 3 aspects. It's been on our people, our customers, and even our suppliers. So at the moment, we've got about 50% of our employees working from home. So we've had to introduce new technology quite quickly to get our call centre staff working from home and make sure we can obviously carry on dealing with our customer base. On customers, we absolutely understand, obviously, the region we operate in. Affordability is a big issue anyway. So we quickly adapted some of our affordability schemes, such as our payment break, to extend that to anyone who was impacted by the coronavirus outbreak financially. They could actually request a 3-month payment break. We've also got an extensive affordability packages available for customers, probably the biggest in the water sector, just taking into account of obviously the region we operate in. And then we actually recently just put £3.5 million into a United Utilities Trust Fund, which will be distributed as form of grants to help customers who are struggling with water debt and to support local organisations who are delivering money advice. So we're doing a lot of work around that affordability matter, and we know we've got a pivotal role we can play in that. And then looking as our supply chain, we obviously got a massive supply chain. We are conscious of obviously making sure we support our suppliers during this crisis. So we actually looked at our payment methods, reducing it from 14 to 7 days to make sure they're not impacted by anything. And then obviously we've had regular engagement with them around health and safety and making sure the right PPEs being in place if they're being doing any work on our behalf. So it's been a big challenge in terms of looking at how we operate. But service levels are still high, with customers contacting us. We've had over 100,000 people now join our priority service scheme. So we're dealing with customers on that front. So from our side, we were just starting the next 5-year investment. So we were looking to actually, before COVID-19, we were estimating that this was going to support 22,000 jobs. We've got a lot of infrastructure we need to build and put in place. So one of the questions, obviously, councils at the moment, and it'll be the same in Manchester, have had to redeploy resource to other areas, but then our concern is obviously making sure that no big infrastructure projects are slowed up in the planning process, and obviously trying to get reinsurance around planning and making sure that there's no delays, so obviously we can carry on with the investment in the region and in Manchester without any delays. So that's a sort of quick summary of sort of where we're at the moment at United Utilities.
Thank you for that, and once again, apologies with the mix-up.
No problem.
Our next speaker is Paul from Electricity Northwest. Paul, yeah.
Hi there.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. So, yeah, very similar priorities for Electricity Northwest. focusing on keeping our colleagues safe, looking after our customers, and keeping the power flowing through this incident. So about half of our people are working from home now, and we recognise that, you know, just as we have staff working from home, a lot of our customers are working from home or have children at home. So really important that we keep the power flowing to everybody's homes. So a lot of our staff have been out and made sure that they're available 24/7 to respond to any incidents on the power network as quickly as possible. We've accelerated our response to incidents by prioritising that over all of our other work. And some of our work we've been unable to continue with at the moment because of some of the challenges that we face, ensuring that can be done safely and that we get the right access to land, etc. So all the resources that we have available, we've dedicated to ensuring that we're giving our customers a first-class service and minimising the disruption to their lives and looking after them as much as possible. And I think our colleagues have been fantastic in their response, turning out at all times of the day or night, and really focus on that very speedy restoration of power supply if there is a problem. We recognise that COVID-19 can be very difficult and exacerbate the situations some of our most vulnerable customers are facing. So we've been proactively contacting our customers on our priority services register. Ours is a bit more established than the UU one, so it's about 10 times the size there. But we've been in touch with over 55,000 of the customers on that register proactively ourselves, just checking in with them, making sure they're okay, and offering support in certain regions. And there's other things that we can do to support as well. So we work very closely with the NHS on the Nightingale Field Hospital at Manchester Central, putting in extra electrical infrastructure to support that new facility and installing a second reserve electricity supply to ensure that had real resilience, and turning that project around in just a matter of days, whereas on a normal time frame that would have taken several months to undertake. So really impressive response from our staff in a sort of emergency situation. We're carrying on with all of our work on maintaining the electricity network and making sure that supplies are resilient as possible, and that we keep focusing on providing our service over not only this immediate response but into the long term as well. And in that, I know our staff have adapted very well to new policies and procedures to enable them to work safely, to observe social distancing, but still carry on with delivering all the essential services that they do. And our plans for the future, we're really thinking about putting together our business plan for the next regulatory period, which will run from 2023 to 2028. And in that, we've already had quite a lot of discussion with Greater Manchester on their aspirations and plans for achieving a low carbon target by 2038, and that forms a backbone for a lot of our infrastructure planning in the next period. And I think we will adapt that very quickly to be part of the green recovery, make sure that we build it back better, and ensure that our current plans for leading the Northwest to zero carbon align very strongly with our recovery plans, so that the investment that we're already planning can be prioritised and focused on what we need post-COVID to make sure we're putting the right economic stimulus in place, but also ensuring that our economic stimulus has a decarbonisation focus to it.
Thank you, Paul. We go to Tom now. Tom Davies.
Hi guys, I'm Tom Davies. I'm from AMI, so Infrastructure Services Organisation. We're currently working closely with TFGM around refreshing and developing their electric vehicle charge point network in Greater Manchester. So the last couple of months have been, listening to all of you guys, has been a challenge. So whilst that contract was only signed in December, and we're still rolling out, in the process of rolling out our first charge points that are brand new, our transition from the previous network that was hosted by Charge Your Car, so Chargemaster, into ourselves, ended up being a key priority, particularly around the COVID-19 stuff. So having to make sure that the service was still there for key workers in Greater Manchester was probably the biggest impact operationally. In terms of stuff that I personally sort of headed up on, things around our brand communications and customer journey planning took quite a big leap as well. So we had to rearrange all of our operations and approach in that particular regard. But we tried to do as much as we can to make sure that we've kept a relationship very close with TFGM, which has been very fruitful, and to make sure that we make as much service as possible available for our key workers. That's been our focus for the last couple of months. What's also been really useful is TFGM's understanding our development in the project timeline and a bit of a shift in some of our agreed timescales, as well as some of the government instruction, particularly around making sure that central government pay us as an organisation outside of our commitments in Greater Manchester throughout the UK's infrastructure market, which has enabled us to make sure our supply chain has stayed paid and up to date. So that's been quite useful. It's also been very impactful when it came to ensuring that different deliverables with our supply chain could be switched. So things like design work could be done at a quicker pace rather than putting things in the ground. So we've had to do things a bit back to front. But overall, it's been resilient, but not without its challenges. But one good positive that's come out of it definitely is our closer relationship with our new client in TFGM.
Thank you for that. So I'd like to thank all the speakers. Just like to highlight that each sponsor has prepared a short brief, and unless there are any objections from the members, I suggest that is emailed out to all the MPs so they can use that as part of their constituency work, but also in order to make representation. Would that be okay, Jill? Could we email that too?
We'll do that, and I think maybe Alex will come back later. There's also a letter from the Greater Manchester voluntary sector that's gone into the Chancellor, which is something, again, I think the group can coordinate, but that hopefully we'll get some actions and discussion points going now. I think people can use the chat, but also to raise that there's also representatives from Chambers of Commerce and also the Manchester universities, in Salford, MMU and Manchester University. So, but now I think it's really a Q&A.
Yeah, so we'll circulate the briefs, and there's a letter that's gone to the Chancellor, and the suggestion is that as the APPG for Greater Manchester, we also write to the Chancellor making representation. So we'll circulate that, yeah. And if that's okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just out of interest, is Lucy joining us later on? Or?
No, she just said, I'm really sorry, but it's just gone mad, as you know.
I'm sure it's hectic. I'm sure it's hectic for all of us.
Yeah.
So fair enough. We
watched literally until, 5 minutes before. So anyway.
So one more point I'd like to make is I believe Councillor Wilson, who's the leader of Stockport Council, she's just been appointed recently by Andy Burnham as a lead for economy. And I don't think she's made this meeting, but Councillor McGee is on the call, who's the deputy leader of Stockport Council, which is my local council. So I thought I'd plug him anyway, because it's my local authority. I hope that's okay, Tom.
Yeah. Now, just quickly, Elise is coming on with Andy later on, but Tom's here.
Great. Well, I'm glad Tom's on anyway. So I think we have some time to maybe discuss some of the contributions that have been made, but also come up with some action points.
Yeah. If people want to put their hand up or unmute themselves or use the chat, give a good indication if you want to come in. I think Jeff Smith does, don't you?
Well, I'll start. Firstly, thanks everybody for the presentations. That was really interesting. I suppose what we need to try and take away as parliamentarians is how we can help, and I think the key thing to understand is where the kind of what the sectors are that are going to suffer real long-term impact on this. And clearly, Adam's presentation made pretty clear that the aviation sector is in a real tough time and is going to take some time to recover. I've had lots of contact from people in the entertainment hospitality industry. Similarly, it's going to be a long haul for them. I just wondered whether somebody, I think you said that there were people on from the Chamber of Commerce, whether somebody might sort of comment on the sectors that are going to really take the longest to recover, and whether what we can do as parliamentarians in putting pressure on the government for support to those sectors.
Yeah, Chris Fletcher's on, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jill, and thanks, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an interesting one, Jeff, because as you rightly point out, there are some which are obvious candidates for continuation of hardship. Aviation, as we heard from Adam there, but also the hospitality sector as well. Speaking about Elise, I've just started to contact Elise from the point of view of the nighttime economy task force, which has been set up as well, because there's no doubt that that sector in particular will be one of the last ones out, or back in whatever the new normal is as we go forward with this. Going around some of our other sector groups in the chamber, it's interesting because the property and construction sector have got real concerns that while you could restart quite easily and there's a good flow of immediate work, if you look 6 to 12 months down the line, there are big gaps beginning to appear where, quite frankly, people are not making decisions now, and that's building up problems for the future where that work suddenly stops. So you've got things like that beginning to get built into the economic system. The engineering manufacturing sector, they're still going through. One of their big issues is, I think, probably around the social distancing bit, and how do you keep safe production lines, and how do you get employees into work and things like that. So that's an ongoing steady issue. Financial and professional services, of course, you've got all sorts of issues there over the economic impact of what we're seeing. And again, I think it's sometimes not the right correct use of language to say we're entering a recovery phase when actually we could be staring down the barrels of a very deep recession in the next 6 months. That doesn't sound like a very good recovery to me. So I think we've got a lot of sectors that are going to get hit pretty hard. And the interesting thing about it is when that furlough period begins to taper, when the part-time furlough starts, and when it actually comes to an end in October time, the impact there could well be, people losing their jobs, people being made redundant because the demand just hasn't picked up. And that's when things will probably enter another phase of the current crisis. Less about the health, more about the economy. So I think it's widespread. There's some obvious candidates, Jeff, but also I don't think it's one that you can sort of say everyone or a particular sector is going to escape from.
Thank you, Chris. Do we have any more?
Could I just sort of offer some thoughts? Really interesting that, Chris, particularly your comments around the construction sector. I mean, here in Greater Manchester, we've got a housing crisis, and we know we've got a housing strategy which talks about needing significant increases in affordable homes, and I know the housing associations are determined to try to address that. There's potentially an opportunity, and through some of the elected representatives here, there's an opportunity to try to position Greater Manchester so that we can come together from a construction sector, from a social housing sector, to try to give that early boost to affordable homes. We may well need to canvass the Treasury. We may well need increased grant support, but it strikes me as though there's an opportunity for us to come together like we do well and get ahead of the game. So interested to perhaps have a conversation offline, Chris, about how we might jointly approach that.
Can I, Tony?
Yes, Tony, do you want to come in? And then we have Jason from GMCA.
Yeah,
Tony?
well, take Jason first, by all means.
You sure? Okay. Jason, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll come in. If the noise is, let me know if the sound's not good, because my laptop's been playing up. So, but hopefully you can all hear me. I thought what might be useful, obviously we've had to change around the agenda. Before the Mayor comes on, I thought I'll just spend a minute of giving people an update on where GM is in terms of the processes around response and where we're moving to in the next phase. I know members have been joining regular calls, so we'll know this. But just as a quick refresh, there has been a strategic command, a coordinating group set up to deal with the response. But now recovery has started in an early planning phase for GM, and it's across a number of thematic areas, and also continue to link with the work of the response cells. I'm sure some of you will have already probably been contacted or engaging with some of the policy colleagues at the CA to have conversations about what does recovery look like. I think has probably broken down into a number of phases around how do we release from lockdown and how does that support the local economy, but also how do we continue to manage and live with COVID, because it isn't going to go away anytime quickly. And then picking up on some of the points which people have said already is how do we build back better, picking on things like supporting a much cleaner, greener economy. And it was interesting to hear from, I think it was it Tom from Amy about the EV charging networks, and Electricity Northwest about putting decarbonisation at the front. So there's an awful lot of work going on. It still continues to be developed. I think picking up on a point from Alex as well, I saw the letter that you sent to the Chancellor. I think it was last week, was it? And I know Barbara's followed up on that. I think there is going to be a panel which will sort of review the impact on the wider demographics. Inequalities already existed, but COVID may have brought those out a little bit more to the fore. So there's going to be a panel which is being established to look to make sure that, well, as we build back better, there's consideration given to the impacts on different communities. So I thought it'd be useful just to give a quick update of where the CA is. Obviously, it's the Mayor who will provide most of the detail, but I thought that might be useful for people on the call.
Thank you, Jason. Tony?
Yes, thanks. I can't be on, unfortunately, when Andy comes on, so forgive me. Couple of comments, though. First, really relating to Lee's point before. I think what would be really helpful is if Greater Manchester MPs can be lobbying lobbying around a Greater Manchester housing strategy. But obviously the housing providers can be instrumental in making sure we're lobbying for the right thing. Yes, of course we want build, but we don't want just indiscriminate build, and it isn't all about new luxury apartments in the centre of the city. It is actually about making sure that the housing associations are played in properly. So we do need that those conversations taking place that can produce something that we can all work around. So that's one. Totally separately, just clearly one of the things that will at least be helpful in terms of the Greater Manchester and the northern economy more generally is that we do still maintain the pressure on for investment in things like the Northern Rail, etc. We can't afford for resources not to go into that, and we do need some clear guidelines as to how that resource will be made available and the timing and sequencing of things, because of itself that would be a huge engineering project, good for skills training, but actually good for all the second and third and fourth round employment that it would create. So we do need, and I'm sure Andy will want to comment on this, so I'd be grateful if that can be passed through. If we can have some coordination from Andy and possibly, obviously, from the other metropolitan districts across the north, so that MPs can be saying the same things as we're getting from Andy for us, but more generally across the north. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony. Yeah. We have Alan.
Yeah, I know I've got colleagues, Michael and Tanya and Andrew on here. Just wanted to say just a couple of words about the university sector and impacts there. I mean, I hope you've seen, I think universities have been stepping up in terms of COVID research, in terms of testing and frontline doctors and nurses, moving them into support of the health service. We've also all been moving our learning and examinations online. I think the real concern for the sector now is about the financial implications of recruitment come this September or October. And that's particularly acute for universities who have significant international student recruitment. And it's just a fact that international student recruitment for a lot of universities subsidises their research activities. So it's about the research base and how that survives any turbulence in international student recruitment. And there's been an ask to government, and there's still an ongoing dialogue with government around that. One of the things that we found really helpful is the 4 universities in Greater Manchester work in partnership. I know the Vice-Chancellors have been meeting on a weekly basis. They've also been in dialogue with some local MPs and with Andy there. So I think it's really important, we're an important part of the local economy, but we're expecting significant turbulence arising out of recruitment, particularly international recruitment come September and October.
Thank you, Alan. Very important note. Thank you. Lord Stunnell, did you want to speak? You might need to unmute something. There we go.
Okay, hope you've got me. Yeah, I just wanted to flag up the fact that it's not just new build across Greater Manchester, but also there's need for a very large retrofit program for existing homes to bring them up to proper energy standards. The government's got an embryonic scheme, but some of us are working behind the scenes to get a bit of cross-party push to rapidly expand the retrofit program, which is good for lots of reasons. First of all, it doesn't have the political barriers that new housing has got. Secondly, obviously it tackles the CO2 problems, but also it's quite labour intensive. And I think in Greater Manchester over the next 18 months, that may be a really serious consideration for all of us. So all of those things seem to be pointing in the right direction. It needs some incentives from government, probably some regulatory changes, and it certainly needs the construction industry to be switched on to the opportunities there are. But I hope that over the next week or two, some of my parliamentary colleagues may have a chance to put their name to a letter, not specific to Greater Manchester, but simply saying that there is a nationwide opportunity, but probably the big metropolitan areas above others have got the opportunity to do this and to tick 3 or 4 boxes simultaneously.
Thank you, Lord Stunnell. We have Charlotte next, and then I'll come to Paul. That's okay. Thanks, Charlotte.
So I'm from the University of Salford, and I certainly don't want to...
Sorry, your audio is very weak. Could you...
Is it? Let me try.
Slightly.
No.
Yeah, that's better, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have my volume up then. Sorry, everyone.
I can hear you now, yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Right, technology, eh? Yeah, I don't want to sort of repeat what Alan said, but I just wanted to give the Salford perspective. I think it's really important to know that, unlike perhaps other industries, in particular hearing from Adam about aviation, for universities, we're not going to know the impact of this until come September. This is much more of a longer term worry for us. For Salford, we do have international students, of course, and they make up our diverse campus. But we're particularly worried about the impact on prospective students from across Greater Manchester, particularly disadvantaged backgrounds, and the uncertainty of what they might be coming to come September, and the impact that that might have in terms of putting them off, essentially. I think it's a recent survey showed sort of 1 in 5 students are thinking about deferring. That will have a huge impact for us financially. We can't make any bones about that. Alan highlighted some of the ways that universities have been contributing to the immediate crisis, so I don't want to repeat that, but I sort of wanted to expand on the Build Back Better stuff, and I think there's a real opportunity for all of the universities across Greater Manchester to really contribute to how we make this recovery work in the long term. Just to highlight for us what we're thinking, we've kind of tried to put our initial thoughts around 3 areas, which are better education and skills. So constantly kind of innovating what we offer at Salford, making sure our education provision aligns with key sectors. We've got plans for a more kind of technical vocational focus, collaborating with FE in the future. We want to think about better innovation for business. So how do we offer business support that is tailored to the needs of the businesses right now through this crisis, and then to deal with the recession that we know is going to come. And then better working. As an employer in Salford and in Greater Manchester, what are we doing to contribute to that vision that I know Andy Burnham's laid out a number of times around flexible working, home working, and the positive impact that that can have on things like congestion, air quality, and less crowded Northern Rail trains, which is a big one for us with our location. And this is where I will repeat Alan, though, to sort of conclude and to go back to the kind of ask to our parliamentarians. It's about the finances. We need some kind of security and stability going forward, and the government has outlined a package of support, but that is more of an immediate cash flow, a bit of a kind of fronting up of existing money, and I think the government could go further and faster on that. And a quick word on our students. I think there has not been enough from the government to really support students in their particularly financial hardship as a result of the drying up of part-time work. I'm sure we've had correspondence from MPs with kind of casework around students not being able to access universal credit. We know that student loans don't quite cover the full costs often, and if students have been in part-time work in, say, hospitality or leisure, then our real worries. We're doing what we can to increase our hardship funds, but I think perhaps, you know, in line with some of what the NUS has been saying on this, that the government could look a bit better at financial hardship. So I hope that was a helpful summary just to kind of complement and build on what Alan said. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think most MPs will have seen casework from students on various issues when it comes to student accommodation, private rentals, but also international students. Greater Manchester has lots of international students, and because of the lockdown, the cash economy has collapsed. So that has had an impact on international students, and I've had a lot of casework about that, and I'm sure other MPs have had too. I think, Paul, did you want to contribute? Thank you.
Yeah, just really a response to Lil Thurl there. On a retrofit program and how that could be very powerful as part of a stimulus for jobs and local economic stimulus. It links very strongly with a program that we've been discussing with government for several years. About how we ensure that as we prepare for decarbonising, we don't just think about setting standards for new homes, but we retrofit and improve the energy efficiency of existing homes as well as existing businesses, so that we minimise our energy use as well as decarbonising energy. We'll never achieve our targets for decarbonisation if we carry on using the same amount of energy. So we have to tackle energy use through energy efficiency at the same time as generating our energy from renewable sources. Two things quickly to say on that. There are things that we can do and have already started to do at Electricity North West to improve the energy efficiency of everybody's devices in their homes by changing the way we operate our network, and we're investing in that. We're investing in that in this current period, and we want to do a lot more of that kind of work with some very innovative new technology that we've developed here in the Northwest and are rolling out in Manchester already. So we're really keen to promote that and get further support for a bigger programme that can be targeted at the most vulnerable households and help them reduce their energy bills. And then we want to look at whether it would be sensible for us to provide some of the finance towards energy efficiency measures in homes. So actually looking at changing the fabric of buildings. Normally our operating envelope looks at the electricity network only, but maybe we should be starting to fund measures in people's homes to reduce the energy they're consuming and help them with that. And we could provide the long-term finance for that so that we don't saddle people with high bills up front that prevent this from happening. So there's lots we can do in this area, and I think it could be a real stimulus area, as Andrew Stimmel was saying.
Thank you, Paul. If you haven't looked at the chat box, you might want to have a look, because Jill's posted some information about future sessions. So I think there's a suggestion that future sessions will be themed along, transport infrastructure, education, new skills, and then we can have a lot more sort of expert panels about those issues. Also, I think Lord Stunnell has, I think he's interested in what Paul's contribution was, and perhaps looking for a bit more detail on some of the things you're talking about. So perhaps the briefing note will have some more information. Otherwise, you can contact Paul directly, and you're more than welcome to share stuff with us, Paul, if you want to. Do we have any other speakers? I think Andy will be joining us shortly, but we do have a little bit of time before we move on.
Elise Wilson is, I think, there. I don't know, can't see her, but she's...
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Elise, hello, how are you?
Hi. I'm all right, how are you?
Good, thank you. I'm glad you can join us. We've just kind of finished hearing from the sponsors. We've also had a discussion from MPs and experts that we have on the call around the issues that different sectors are facing and how we can work together to highlight the issues to the government. We're going to coordinate a letter that Alex has done from the voluntary sector to the Chancellor and use the APPG to sort of, make sure that those issues get heard at the highest level. Did you want to contribute? Maybe, I know you have a new role in the Combined Authority, so congratulations on that appointment. Did you want to add, did you want to say something about your new role, maybe add something, how you look forward to working with the APPG and all the sponsors that we have?
Yeah, thank you. So I have recently taken over from Sir Richard Lees on the leading on economy and business for the Combined Authority. It's obviously a massive challenge taking on a role like that in the current situation. But one I'm kind of relishing the thought of dealing with. So it's like I've only been doing it, I've only taken over for like the last week or two. Before that I led on digital. We are putting a lot of work in at the minute, not just at the Combined Authority, but as part of the LEP and across partner organisations to consider what recovery is and what it's going to look like, and how we're going to engage with government, of which you'll all play a key part of that, in making sure that we can see recovery as swiftly as we can, but not just that swift recovery, but better recovery. So our fundamental thinking is around how we create confidence, because that's what we're going to need to see. People are going to need to see that and feel confident about getting back to their lives, but also business needs to feel confident that they can keep working, keep investing in Greater Manchester, and keep going. And we are really keen to work in building back better, and delivering on that confidence. So whether that's through a safety and standards-led approach, where we think about actually what can we do to make people feel confident, to empower people to feeling actually I can be back at work, or I can be back at school, or I can take the bus, and what do we need to do to create that confidence. So, and under by no means is that safety or standard-led approach a way to slow down recovery. In fact, we feel, and I know colleagues on the Greater Manchester LEP have expressed the same thoughts on the matter. We feel that actually in the long run it would enable recovery so much faster if people feel feel secure in what they're doing and feel safe about what's going on. So I think that'll be an absolutely key element for us. We are, I think, we have high ambition in Greater Manchester. We always have. I'm sure all of you on this call now feel the same, and that collective ambition remains. And we had a vision that was based on a piece of work which I'm sure you all know about, around the Independent Prosperity Review, which we created then the local industrial strategy and our 4 frontiers that we're looking to continue to use that, because we feel that that is still the right way to go, and those frontiers remain crucial to us recovering and then getting to a point where actually we can get back to growth. And those frontiers, I'm assuming you'll be fully aware of, but include clean growth, health innovation, digital, and we have to keep we're keeping that focus on what it is that we're trying to achieve now, but how we do that. And I think I came in at the end of a call will be, it may be different, and that's where we need to put a piece of work together now, as to how do we, bearing in mind we feel like that ambition remains the same, how do we deliver that in the current climate, because the current climate is completely different to what we were looking at before, and I think there's quite a lot of work going on. What will be particularly good for Greater Manchester and what stands us in good stead, I think, is the way that we work in cooperation. It's the combination of what we're doing and the teamwork that happens. And I know across all the boroughs, yourselves as MPs, but also with the LEP and other organisations across the voluntary sector, we know that there's really good links that we want to build on, and I think that's where we're going to be able to help create the dynamic changes we need to do to help with that recovery. I am aware that I think Andy is going to be joining us shortly, and I just wanted to maybe give you an opportunity if you wanted to ask me any questions or maybe raise something specifically with me. But I am looking forward to hopefully this being one of many meetings that we might have together.
Brilliant, thank you. I think Paul's going to circulate a briefing to Jill, and then that can go to all the members of APPG with some more detail on the projects that they're doing. With regards to the contribution Lisa's made, do we have any questions for her, perhaps discussion points? No. Right, okay.
I mean, just from our point of view, just eager to say hello and happy to set something up, outside of this, just to give you a run through perhaps the stuff at the start that you might have missed from an airport point of view, and how we can support each other's agendas. And we're well plugged into obviously the economic resilience stuff for GM already, but it'd be great to perhaps to catch up with you separately if you're okay to set that up.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd really welcome that, absolutely, because obviously the airport is going to be is absolutely key, and they'll be part of what that recovery looks like. And we remain, I mean, I know I'm sure we all remain completely ambitious around ensuring that we have that international gateway and the role of what the airport plays in that, not just directly as an employer, but also the potential later on. So yeah, absolutely would be welcome an opportunity to get together on that.
That's great, thank you. I think just to pick up something Chris said earlier from our point of view as well, I think something I was feeding into the colleagues on that economic call was that we're dead eager to understand from that point I made earlier about enablers. I think it's come out loud and clear from the university conversation that actually, not just focusing on aviation as a sector in its own right, but it as an enabler for what other sectors need from their recovery point of view. So capturing that and perhaps working together on interventions, and from a chamber point of view, understanding from membership, how much of the issues faced by businesses of all sizes and what sectors relate to, the ability to travel or trade internationally generally, but also perhaps more acutely from a quarantine point of view, and how much that becomes a concern. I mean, I was noticing from the weekly pulse surveys that if you combine the issues businesses facing being either access to suppliers or access to customers, and travel being the issue, you're into 45-50% of the respondents. And so it'd be almost useful to perhaps work together on how we can capture that and make clear to government that it really is a serious issue.
Thank you, Adam. Paul, did you want to come back in briefly? And then if Andy's joined us, we can move on.
Yeah, just at least to say it'd be great to set up an additional dialogue. We're just pulling together a funding programme for the region. I'm looking at around £1 billion of funding that we're going to put into the region in 2023 to 2028, and ensuring that is very closely aligned with what you're trying to do. I think it fits very strongly with a number of the key themes you talked about around the green economy, around innovation. It'd be great to join that up.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it'd be interesting, definitely, to hear about what it is that you've been working on. Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I think Jason is checking on Andy's status. He might be running late. Hopefully he can join us. But I found this quite useful, and I think what we have remaining on the agenda is an update from Andy, and then perhaps a brief question and answer session. But all the contributions that have been made, they've been minuted, and I think we've had a reasonable discussion in the limited time we have. But also, I think with regards to briefing papers, and I know members have specific interest, policy interest, and they'll be coming back to the sponsors directly on more detail, perhaps doing things locally. And as Jill has mentioned, in the future, there are plans to do themed sessions on transport, on education, on the skills in the region. So hopefully we can have, although I found this to be quite a positive event, hopefully in the future we can have more targeted ones, as Jill suggested. And with regards to members, I think the letter will be making its way, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, in addition to the briefings. So I think with regards to the APPG, the members of the APPG, we can write collectively, building on what Alex has already, Alex has already written to the Chancellor, and we can build on that. And hopefully, as more people put their name to it, it can have a bigger voice. Fully.
Yeah, absolutely. I would ask that. I think it's been a theme in some of the conversations that we've had with government so far, and I know Andy's been in those leading those conversations for us about how we work together, where we can get. Take advantage of what Greater Manchester and the unique position Greater Manchester is in, to drive the change and to see that recovery. And I think there's an opportunity, and there does seem to be an appetite now to have more of those conversations, and to really appreciate what Greater Manchester can actually deliver, and how what can be done locally, and the capacity locally to do things, on what part of that national framework, part of a national vision, if you like, forward. So we do seem to be making progress on that, and I would like to think that is something that hopefully we can continue and we build on, maybe in part through this format as well, where knowing that where good can happen, and at what level that can really make a difference. Definitely.
So Kevin Lee is on the is.
We're just checking now. I'm hopeful it's imminent. That's probably the best term to use.
Thank you, Jason.
Imminent. We will see.
To be fair, him and I were just on the same call before, so I know that the problem is you end up with things back to back. I'm sure you're all the same, and at some point you've got to squeeze some stuff in between, haven't you? But we've just had a really positive call, I think, and hopefully that he'll want to share that with you as well. Definitely.
Thank you.
And just to fill the gap, maybe we can just sort of say that, as I said in the chat, that it is very much looking at how we can collaborate and build a consensus amongst and use the all-party group as a means to actually make sure that Greater Manchester, is putting those concerns and points forward. I'd be interested to know, in terms of, we've sort of thought that we've had a conversation, Jason and I and Lucy, about what those priority areas are. We've hit on them today, and I think it does actually dovetail quite well, with Andy's Build Back Better. Lord Sunnell talked about the huge challenge for retrofit. The whole government rhetoric at the moment is about shovels in the ground, making sure some of these things actually happen. So I think, from today, hopefully we can be in a process of, looking at the priority areas and actually getting that conversation going, bringing in the MPs, from all parties as well, to really get behind what Greater Manchester does need in terms of building back better. And there's some great innovation going on and thinking that's going on. So we just need to capture that and get that voice, out there.
I think that segues into the mayor's arrival.
Oh,
welcome, Andy. Great, good timing. So we were hoping, we've heard from the sponsors. We've had a bit of a discussion as well. We were hoping you might want to give us a brief update, and perhaps then there might be some questions you might be able to take. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to be slightly late joining everybody. Actually, the reason I'm slightly late is we've just had a call with a broad group of ministers. So we are trying to move things forward. I think Elise, who's on the call, is on this one as well. So it's good timing, Nav. Build Back Better, I think it's amazing how much that's caught people's imagination. It feels to me that, we really should be setting high ambitions. I mean, it's going to be tough, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's going to be painful, recovery. But if people can see it's painful, but we're building towards something that's, worth building for, then I think it will be better. It will keep people hopefully on that journey with us. I mean, just to give people some of the things that we're grappling with. Obviously, the transport system is going to be crucial through this period. We are working for a deal on Metrolink to be able to give us as much capacity as we can get. We think, I would say the case for bus reform is advanced by the situation that we're in, not sort of made irrelevant, if you like, because we are going to potentially see more routes being lost if we're not careful, and we need to sort of shore up the public transport system. And actually, now what we need to do is kind of put a coherent vision out for an integrated system to support the clean air agenda and capturing all the benefits on a longer term basis of what we've been experiencing in the last few weeks. So there's no doubt it's going to be a difficult year until we get a vaccine on public transport, with social distancing. I think there's pain coming, but I can really see now how we might accelerate the introduction of a fully integrated transport system in Greater Manchester coming through this. So we took a decision with leaders this week to start procurement on a bike hire scheme. So that's one piece of news I can share with the group, and that's getting underway now. We've already signed a deal for electric vehicle charging points. We are looking at using powers to create more cycling and walking capacity. and obviously advancing the B network. But then beyond that, we want to kind of carry on the momentum into the whole debate about a clean air zone. So we announced yesterday that while we're having to delay it a year because of this, we are still going to consult in the autumn on our proposals. But because of the time that we've been able to take, we've now got it all lined up together with all of these different components that I mentioned, including minimum taxi standards for Greater Manchester. You know, that will be part of the consultation. So we're not just consulting on people's vehicles getting cleaner. You know, we are also now thinking of, you know, a single livery and single standards. So you can see how, you know, the whole system could take a kind of big step forward through this. And crucially, obviously, if you put bus reform into that mix as well, then I think it starts to get pretty compelling. We're also talking about rail devolution. There's talks underway with the operator of last resort around all of those issues. So, you know, while it is going to be challenging, I can see opportunities here to accelerate the change we need on Greater Manchester's transport system. Just to touch on the points I heard Jill mentioning that Lord Stunwell had raised. I mean, I think that's such an important point about opening up job creation in new industries. So I'm being told now that many of the people who are furloughed in Greater Manchester will no longer have jobs to go back to. You know, that we have to assume that there's going to be high levels of redundancy amongst some of those people, and sadly, some of them will be obviously young people. And the effects of this could be quite scarring on young people in terms of loss of confidence, loss of career progression. And we're very conscious of that. And one thing I would want to put out to the all-party group and see if we could seek some support from you is to see if we could encourage the government to think flexibly about furlough as a stepping stone, possibly to some of those new industries that Greater Manchester has ambitions to expand. So let's take that issue of, you know, retrofitting domestic properties. We know if we are to hit our goal of 2038 for a zero carbon Greater Manchester, we've got to do that at some point. So we may as well do it now. You know, now is the obvious moment to do it. And you can begin to see a solution where furlough could reform into something that we used to call the Future Jobs Fund, going back to the days of the government I was in, when obviously part of people's wages were met to stimulate, to create jobs in industries. And I'm wondering whether, you know, we could put together a proposal to kickstart a retrofitting industry, as essentially a public-private partnership, possibly to begin with, where we start to scale up and we create that new workforce from some of the people who are facing redundancy in this time, and we quickly give them that stepping stone to jump on, rather than, you know, leaving them to sort of become redundant and all of the issues that social issues that will come from that. So that's an issue that's very much in our minds at the moment. But there are other things that we could ask for too, you know, around digital infrastructure, around efforts to solve the housing crisis. I can see Kath Green on the call, and I would want to work with our GM housing providers to put a bid to the government to say, well, surely this is a moment to get people building homes for social rent, and possibly they could also be zero carbon homes for social rent. That might be something that we could use to kickstart the modular housing industry. So again, I think there is a case to be made here for using this moment to accelerate the things that we've had ambitions to do anyway. And I think one of the things that this situation has shown is Greater Manchester at its best when it comes to innovation. We've been actually innovating pretty kind of rapidly through this crisis. Just if I may mention a couple of things. We worked at pace to introduce a hospital-style alert system for our care homes. So what's called an Opal system in the NHS that creates the black alert system in winter. Well, we've now introduced that for our care homes, and it means we've been able to have a sort of oversight of the social care system through this that other areas just simply haven't been able to have, and we've helped them with PPE, one example, because of that. Another is that the crisis triggered final agreement on an integrated health and care record. for all 2.9 million residents in Greater Manchester. So now there is one record that covers primary, acute and social care. Again, a massive innovation in quite a short space of time. And then more on the nighttime economy front, people may have seen the United We Stream service that we launched, and that's had massive reach, hasn't it, within such a short space of time, but is obviously supporting our creative community in the nighttime economy. So it's kind of, it's great in one way, but frustrating in another, when you think, well, how can we make these changes in the middle of a crisis? But we can't make these changes when we've got more time and things aren't as frenetic. And there is something sort of wrong there, isn't there? If you look at homelessness, everyone in. Well, I fully agree with that as a policy goal. And look at the change that we've been bringing about in such a short space of time to people. And it's that spirit that we've had in this sort of response phase you need to carry into the recovery phase. So building back better isn't, I don't think it's a sort of pie in the sky sort of pipe dream. I think we can actually make a credible case to do this now, and lay down what it could look like in Greater Manchester. Be honest with people that it's going to be a tough road back, no question about that. But as I say, you can keep people with you if they can see it building to something that's not what we had before. And I think we are getting close to being able to articulate that very clearly. On the call with the ministers that I was just on, I did point to some of these innovations in social care that we'd made in the middle of the crisis. And I offered Greater Manchester as a pilot for essentially a national health and care service, a fully integrated system. I think we are ready to go that next step now. Maybe we were unrealistic at the start of devolution in Greater Manchester about the speed with which you could integrate these two things. But I see it now really coming together quite quickly. And I think we're at the point where we could go, well, I have done, I've just put it to the government on this call, maybe think about making us a pilot for essentially a one system approach to health and social care. Because even before you get into the argument about how you fund it, you can financially reform the current system to make it more efficient, rather than paying hospitals every time someone goes into hospital. Take a year of care tariff for the shielded population, if that makes sense, because then you create an incentive to support people well at home rather than treat them in a hospital bed. And I think that's quite a powerful proposal I think that we could put forward, and I would hope colleagues on the call might support. I'll mention one last thing, Nav, if I may, before taking any questions. I think we cannot lose sight of this issue about employment and the sort of divisions in society that come from people's employment standards and status. While many of us have been sitting at home having sort of middle-class Zoom conferences, other people have been out keeping the country running, but they're often people who have the poorest employment conditions. And that's just not right from a moral point of view, but I don't think it makes sense from a sort of business point of view, in that if these workers are essential, as we've all been saying, but if they are essential, you need to give them security in their employment so that they can carry on turning up for work every day. An example from social care, where Unison did a survey of Northwest care workers, that 80% feared they wouldn't be paid if they needed to self-isolate. I mean, I think that tells you how employment and pay have got so low in some sectors that they're not supporting the good running of those sectors. And I think the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter could just be something now whose time has come. I'm proposing to link it to all public procurement in Greater Manchester, and really sort of kind of capture the mood that's around about revisiting all of these issues and kind of giving all citizens a basic level of security and reward for the work that they do. But I'll leave it there now. But just a few themes to throw out there, and hopefully building back better is something we can all work together on.
Thank you. That's incredibly useful. I've had a couple of people who've indicated they want to contribute. Just before I go to them, I thought I'd just mention some of the questions that were posed earlier. I'll just take a minute. So Alex from GMCVO, he talked about the need to support local charities, social enterprises, when it comes to building back better. Lee from the housing providers, he talked about the lost support from government with regards to the Everyone In scheme and how we can support Andy, you as the mayor, but also the scheme. There was a very important contribution. All contributions were important, but from Adam regarding the scale of the support that's needed for the aviation sector. And Manchester Airport is such a big part of the Greater Manchester community. So Adam gave a really important update on that. We've also had, and I'll try and get the name right, John. We've had John from United Utilities. There was a mix-up earlier regarding utility provisions and green recovery. Paul from Electricity Northwest has agreed to provide us, the members of the APPG, a detailed briefing on the projects that they are delivering about sustainable future. And we also heard from Tom from Amy regarding, the COVID-19 crisis hitting the poorest communities the hardest, and the levelling up agenda. So the first question is from Lord Stunnell from Stockport Borough.
Thank you very much, Sam. And thank you, Andy, for coming in so strongly on the retrofit agenda. I think it's really important. I'm interested in your idea about perhaps using furlough as some kind of bridging mechanism. We need to link it to the skills agenda as well, because it's not just a question of somebody who is doing job A switching to a completely different job. There's going to be a skills and capability issue as well. So as I understand it, you've now got quite a grip on the skills agenda provision in Greater Manchester. And I think there's a way of linking the three things together so that you can actually have a better trained workforce with better capacity, delivering a really important environmental outcome. So I hope you can join all that together, and I'll be very happy to participate in conversations about that.
Great. That's a great offer, Andrew. Thank you. And I think you're absolutely right, because people will need retraining, won't they, to move into that kind of work. So, I mean, I'm only thinking aloud, really. I think there's a lot of detail to work through, but let's just say Kath Green, working with our housing providers, could create an arrangement where they may employ some young people, on furlough or a future jobs fund sort of, part paid wages model. That could be done with day release with our colleges, couldn't it, to start to sort of train them in some of those skills. So it does need thinking through. But actually, if you could help us, and go through some of those issues, yeah. I think the time is now. Really, I think that the risk is to leave too much time. Oh yes, it's interesting, but we'll do a piece of research. I think it needs to be quite quick. Really, I think the time is of the essence. And I'd be interested via Kath talking to our housing providers. So would there be any appetite amongst them to get on with retrofitting programs of scale, starting with social housing, and then take it from there, with our colleges as partners in that.
Yeah. Thank you. I have Jeff Smith and then Paul, if that's okay. Jeff.
Thanks, Nav. Thanks, Andy, for the update.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Andy. Just firstly, I think you're doing a really good job. The GMCA have been doing a good job on the coordination, particularly around social care. And I think I agree with Lord Snow. I think the idea of some sort of equivalent of a future jobs fund around retrofitting, I think is a really good idea. I think obviously it needs a lot of thinking about, but it's it ticks so many boxes. I think it's something we could all get behind, certainly. I wanted to ask about clean air and the clean air zone. And I suppose the realistic deliverability of anything anytime soon, because, we're enjoying clean air at the moment. The government's strategy seems to be cars and public transport. And I know it's been quite difficult for you to get support for the clean air zone, funding for the clean air zone. I don't know what you thought, whether you'd had any sort of talk to the government about how high a priority it might be for them, because I suspect it may not be. So just, I suppose the question is, what's the realistic timescale for looking at implementing that?
Thanks very much, Jeff. We've made a commitment to go out to consult again in the autumn. So Andrew Weston made that public yesterday, with an implementation now 2022. I think that's, realistically we can't do it any faster than that. But we did make a point of making this statement yesterday just to show that we are now moving again on it, and it's not in the long grass. And what we've done is we've upped our ask basically on a clean van fund, clean taxi fund, clean bus fund. I mean, obviously I think your constituency started to see some of those green buses going around. You know, they work, they're nice, they're good, right? Let's have a lot more of them. So I think what we would be asking the all-party group to help us with is some lobbying. And actually, Jeff, it could be a priority for the government in that this is a way of giving businesses support, isn't it, to switch their vehicle fleet. And it's also a way of supporting people who are self-employed taxi drivers. You know, they've been really battered in this particular time. And again, it's one of the things that they were going to have to do anyway. So helping cities make the transition to clean air was something the government was going to have to fund. So I think you're on more of a winner when you're giving them things they were going to have to do anyway, like retrofitting that Andrew mentioned, or clean air like you are. Just that you're asking for an accelerated timetable and possibly a little bit more money to do it, because you could almost see it's almost as a fiscal stimulus, couldn't you, as well as a you know, and a job protection scheme, as well as a clean air scheme. So we've upped our ask, and I'm sure we can circulate via Jill or Devo Connect the sort of new ask, if you like, and if colleagues were able to help us with that. But as I was saying, you know, it's not just clean air; it's going to bring in common taxi standards, the electric vehicle charging points, the bike hire scheme. Hopefully, will be landing around the same time. So we've kind of got things in the same place now, hopefully, and it will make more sense to the public, I think, when they can see all of these components coming together. But if you could help us with that advocacy around the business, the vehicle support, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Andy. Just before I come to you, Paul, Kat, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to respond to Andy's direct plea there, really. Obviously, we'd be delighted to get engaged in that sort of process, looking at what we can make happen with social housing and retrofitting. We've done some detailed work. A couple of the housing providers have done detailed work on their own stock, so we've got some really good, strong evidence to, you know, see what we can do around that. But I also wanted to make the link between the point that Andy's made around employment, and I'm old enough to remember the Future Jobs Fund stuff too. And, you know, there was some great work on there. And actually, even more recently, when the universal credit was introduced, a lot of housing providers partnered up with their local job centres and were taking on people who were unemployed at that point. And I think with some tweaking, we could really start to look at how we could model that more effectively, responding to the fallout. We know people are going to be made redundant, but let's try to get ready to make meaningful responses to improve their lives and improve them quickly. And the final point I just wanted to make is around the homelessness agenda. It's been breathtaking, to be honest, the responses that I've seen from housing providers across Greater Manchester and the numbers that have been rehoused. I mean, it's quite sad in one way, but a benefit in another, that some housing providers were only rehousing emergency lets, as you can imagine, because of social distancing and safe working practices and so on. But what that's meant is we've now got a number of properties, and we had a conversation this morning about how we engage with Andy and Andy's homelessness team around getting people into the right properties. And I'm looking forward to the conversation next week, Andy, on that. Just so those are a few sort of just points I wanted to make. I didn't want to lose the moment with Andy in the room.
Thanks so much, Kat. And I'm just seeing Lee's comment on the chat as well, Nav, about providers being keen to help us kickstart this. It's good that there's something to build from, Kat. In some ways, it might be better to have one scheme, mightn't it? You know, it might simplify it if we had one scheme that all the providers could be partners in, as opposed to, you know, 15 or so schemes. That, you know, and I think that's the kind of thing we need to take forward, really, isn't it, from this discussion, just the practicalities and how you involve the colleges in that. But great, we've got something to build from there. Nav, everyone in, as Kath is saying, has been an incredible effort. I mean, Alex makes the point about support for voluntary and community organisations. And I was hearing I was on the Greater Manchester Homelessness Action Network call yesterday, and I know that people have been working flat out, but some of our organisations are struggling big time now when it comes to their resources. So yeah, we do recognise that. Kath, in terms of where we go from here, we've just confirmed a bed every night phase 3 today. So this is funding that we'll be allocating from July. It was always going to be a higher quality offer because we keep trying to improve it every time we bring it into a new phase. But obviously now it's got to be a socially distanced offer, so that's tougher. So there's about 450 places commissioned on ABEN 3, and we have about 800 people in hotels and apartments at the moment. So, you know, again, you know, to colleagues on the call, there's an advocacy ask from us to government to be a joint partner in this. The Bed Every Night funding is discretionary Greater Manchester funding that we have found, but we are appealing to them to sort of help us with the costs of everyone in and the transition to something more stable. But I am absolutely aware of what housing providers have been doing, Kath, to move people on. I saw yesterday Rochdale Borough-wide housing, I think it located 7 people with a package of support. You know, that was just one that came to my attention yesterday. No, they've really stepped up. So through you, if you could pass on my thanks to everybody.
Just, I appreciate it's 3 o'clock and people have to move on. I promised Paul could have a few seconds. Paul, do you want to make a very brief point as others have to leave?
I'm okay for a couple of minutes now, but it's whether everybody else is, but don't worry.
Very kind of you. Go on, Paul.
Thank you, Nav. Thank you, Andy. Just going back to your comments earlier about building back better. At the Green Summit in last year, 2019, we launched our Leading Northwest Zero Carbon Plan. And I think we're quite uniquely placed to support these ambitious moves to a cleaner and greener future. And we're making and continuing to make significant investments in the region. We're now consulting on our business plans for 2023 to 2028. And as we keep working together on prioritising the green recovery, I'm just wondering, Andy, if you have any thoughts on how we help everybody make the right long-term choices for a sustainable future when they're making those choices, whether those are choices for businesses or choices for all the people in Manchester, when they're starting to get back involved in the economy, making choices about new purchases, making choices about transport, making choices about housing. How do we encourage people to not only make choices that stimulate the economy, but also make choices that lead us towards a sustainable and greener future as well?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Now, shall I answer that? I mean, because there's so many ways that we could go after what Paul is saying. I mean, one is the digital infrastructure that I was talking about. Because if we have fully digitally enabled communities and a standard of full fibre that is as good in the north of the conurbation as it is in the south, that supports more home working, which you could argue is greener, but also better, you know, for people. You could offer more flexibility to people. I think this is going to be a big feature of the next couple of years, you know, quite a big change, I think, in people's working practices. I'm going to be saying to the city centre-based businesses quite soon that, you know, such is the limited capacity on our transport system, that really only 25% of people realistically could come into the office in the first phase. And they would have to come in at 7 in the morning, 8, 9, you'd have to stagger when they came in. So if you think about that, there is quite a big win really from a clean air point of view if you can encourage more home working, flexible working. But having said that, there's going to be a lot of cars on the road short term but then once you get beyond the short term, you know, when we're back in a more sustainable position, then hopefully you've got a long-term benefit. In terms of purchases, I've asked TFGM to look at whether or not we could support a bike to work scheme. You know, some companies offer interest-free loans to employees to buy bikes, and I was wondering whether we could make that open to everybody. And it's challenging, to be honest, but we are looking at what more we can do in that space. And obviously, it's critically linked to the provision of segregated space for pedestrians and cyclists. On the back on the clean air zone, obviously by going out to consultation, we are kind of sending a big message to SMEs and taxi drivers or taxi firms to start to plan to make changes to shift their fleet. You know, we don't want to see anyone, any business go bust as a result of the Clean Air Zone or any job lost, but we do want them to sort of, you know, go with this. Because bear in mind, you know, once you've got a cleaner vehicle, it often is cheaper to run anyway. So we can help them with the upfront costs. It can be a win-win really for everybody. So we are thinking about these things. And if we were able with Kath and others to kickstart retrofitting and a modular home building program, then, you know, you could imagine that we could also then, you know, if people are doing more home working, they'll start to take more interest in their home, won't they, and how much it costs to run their home, and so that might create an opportunity. So yeah, you know, it's pretty tough right now, and when I think of what lies ahead in terms of the challenges for GM, but you can see genuine opportunities in the midst of all of this, and yeah, we're going to have to work really cleverly and really hard to take them, but I think we can.
Do you think there's some behaviour change that we can build upon? People have had to make very sudden changes in their behaviours, but I think once you go through a change, you can get used to change and maybe move to other things in the future. So I think, you know, the opportunity to stimulate behaviour change are there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a common theme of this, isn't it? Just how much can change in a short space of time, and why does it take a crisis to do all of that? Surely it should be easier to change your life when you're not in the middle of a crisis. But if you look at levels of exercise, I hope there is a permanent benefit in terms of more people more regularly taking exercise. I think the behaviour change in terms of people's work, I think, will be real. I don't, you know, it's going to necessitate. The reason why it'll be real is because we've got to live with this for another year of, you know, and the numbers coming into offices is going to have to be limited. So I think that will cement the change, to be honest. So I do expect that to happen. I don't know about you. I don't know. There's benefits of meetings like this in my world of politics. There's no plotting over the tea and coffee in the corner, but at the same time, it's not great talking into a laptop all day, is it? So you know, there's pros and cons, but a bit of a mixture. I think we'll see a mixed economy, won't we? More people working like this. Maybe that relieves pressure on our trains going forward and the commute. I certainly hope that's the case. So I think what this tells you is if you're direct with the public, they will actually, you know, the change can come and come quite quickly. And you know, I think there's interesting things that I think we need to really keep through this whole period. But yeah, interesting questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you to all of you. I know we've overrun by a few minutes, but I think the discussion was valuable. Andy's talked about some really exciting proposals that they're working on, some good ideas. I personally look forward to receiving the briefs, and I'm sure we'll be coordinating that letter. On a last note, I'd like to thank Jill for making sure that this runs smoothly and for doing all the work in the background to make sure that the APPG functions properly. And once again, thank you to all of you for making time. I know you're super busy.
Thanks, Nav.
Especially to Andy for staying longer than he should have.
Thanks, Nav. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jill.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks.